Welcome back to another episode of our ongoing series, where we are taking an in-depth look at every single psalm in the book of Psalms, breaking them down verse by verse. In this episode, we're looking at Psalms 120 through 130. But before we get into that, if you haven't already done so, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel so that you never miss an episode. Also, if you would, I invite you to check out the links in the description below for more resources, including a link to download the complete Book of Psalms in a variety of formats, as well as other helpful resources for your walk with Christ. So with that said, let's dive right into the Psalms. First up is Psalm 120. This psalm is a song of degrees. In other words, it was likely used when the Israelites were going up to Jerusalem to worship in the temple. It begins with a call for help, pleading with God to save the psalmist from those who curse him and who curse him without any cause or reason. In verse 2, he says, may they be consumed out of this world and in it." This is a strong statement, but it shows the intensity of the hatred that this person has for the psalmist. The psalmist goes on to say that their hatred is unjustified because he has acted with integrity and uprightness. He has not acted in a sinful manner, nor has he dealt with them in any way that would warrant this type of hatred. Then he calls on God to remember this when he brings judgment upon the wicked. So basically, this psalm is just a cry for help against those who hate the psalmist without cause, asking God to remember his righteousness and deal with them according to their wickedness. Next is Psalm 121, a very short psalm that's actually a part of the songs of ascent. These are the songs that were sung while going up to worship in Jerusalem. And this one specifically speaks of looking to God alone for help, declaring that the Lord is the only one who makes the psalmist's feet like hinds' feet, which are very sure-footed and will make him stand in the high places. And so this psalm is essentially saying, I will not fall because I'm depending on God alone. Psalm 122 is another song of ascents, and it says a psalm of praise for the joy of being in Jerusalem during the Feast of Tabernacles. The psalmist here rejoices over the peace and unity that he sees among the people of God, praying that the house of David would prosper and that Jerusalem would become a place of peace. In Psalm 123, we see a complete shift in tone. Here, the psalmist is no longer joyful, but rather is humbled and confesses his own sin. He says, "We have lifted up our hands in prayer toward your commandments." So they've been praying, but they acknowledge that they've been unfruitful, that they haven't been obeying God. And so they cry out to God, asking him to remember them and have mercy on them. They want to return to God wholeheartedly, not just with their lips, but with their heart. And so they cry out for God's mercy, acknowledging their sin and begging him to forgive them and restore them. Last but not least is Psalm 130, which begins with a declaration of hope. The psalmist says, "Out of the depths I have called you, O Lord," and then he goes on to explain that he's called out to God for help, and he knows that God will answer him. He knows that God is merciful and will forgive him all of his iniquities. He will save the psalmist from destruction and from lying in the pit. And so, in this psalm, the psalmist is essentially saying, God, I am in desperate need of your help. I've sinned and I deserve punishment, but I know that you are merciful and just, and you will forgive me and deliver me from the consequences of my sin. And there we have it, Psalms 120 through 130. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to see more just like it, be sure to subscribe to this channel and click the bell notification so that you never miss an episode. Also, be sure to check out the links in the description below for more resources, including a link to download the complete Book of Psalms. Until next time, thanks for watching.